Hello, Lizzie here, and today I'm going to show you how to make Jazmin. You can't really avoid it, can you? There she is in all her glory. She's big and very, very useful, I think you'll find. So when you look at the pattern, this is what you'll see, beautifully photographed. So you can see it gives you a kind of idea of what you can use it for. Here we've got it as sort of a laundry idea. Maybe it's going to be for your bathroom toys for the children. Maybe it's going to be for the bedroom, for their toys in there. Maybe it's going to be where you put your soiled linen, so you can have it in the corner of a bedroom. I've done it with lovely sort of holiday fabric because that's the sort of thing I had in my mind when I was thinking about making Jazmin. But she's actually quite a simple make. She's just rather large, which makes her very, very practical and very, very useful. I suppose you could take her shopping if you wanted to, but that wasn't the idea about doing her. She's actually got a nice rounded bottom, so if I do it like that, you can see it's a nice rounded bottom, and it sits quite nice and flat because I'm using Decaville lights in the bottom. You don't have to use that. You can use a sort of medium weight stabiliser, a couple of layers of that. You could just use wadding or batting at the bottom. There's wadding and batting around the outside, so I've made it quite sort of soft and squidgy on the sides. But again, if you wanted to, you could use Decaville light all over. But it is quite a large make, so I don't want it to be, so it's quite costly for you to make. But you'll obviously need a good ½ metre to actually make Jazmin and the second project that we have for the month of June. That's 2021. Inside I've got complementary fabric. You can see it's the heart fabric, and I've used that as a complementary fabric for the handles as well, and I've done that with the one I'm going to make up. So you can see already she's going to be really, really useful. I'm gonna sort of sit her down here so she's just out of the way just for a little while. Okay, now in the pattern you actually get kind of like two halves, or it's 2/4 I should say, to make a half. So you're going to tape A to B, and I've just used a little bit of masking tape going across. You don't overlap them, just butt them up together and then just tape them, and then you're going to put the whole thing on the fold there, so you get a complete circle. So that's the sort of thing that you're aiming for there. So you'll need a base for the lining, a base for the outer, an outer whole piece. We don't do these in two, we do this one whole piece, and the same for the lining. And then you need obviously your two straps that you're going to put on as well. And you can see I've used complementary fabric. Actually the fabric's really super. It's like, this is the outside, can you see? It's like little houses, and I've used the stripe to go with it. I think it works quite well. So this could be quite generic because I'm not using beachy sort of fabric. One thing I'm going to point out to you before we even start is that I've used Decaville. It's on the back there. It's a Decaville light. But like I say, you could use 2 layers of H250 if you want to instead. Now when you use Decaville light, ideally you steam it on. It's the only stabiliser that I know that it asks you to steam it. So I squirt a little bit of best press on there to sort of get that steam effect, but my actual top fabric shrunk a little. And I don't know if you can, yeah, you can see on screen that it did shrink back. Now I know that the Decaville is pretty much perfectly cut, but the fabric has shrunk back a bit, so I'm using the outer edge of where the Decaville is really as my seam. Okay, that's my guide. It was quite interesting to watch it because I sprayed it, started to steam it, and you saw the fabric like that. Now all these fabrics should be pre-shrunk. You shouldn't really have to pre-wash any quilting cotton unless you're making a garment, and then I'd always say pre-wash just in case. But it was interesting to see that actually shrink down. Whether that's an optical illusion, I don't know, but you can see around the edge, and they were cut from the same pattern piece, obviously. So that was just a guide on the pattern. So you're going to print those two off, you're going to join them together, and then this goes on the fold. If you want to print 4 and join all four together, and then use the whole circle as your template. I couldn't quite get this onto an A4 or letter size piece of paper. You know that's how I like to do the pattern. So enough said, let's move on. I'll just get my pattern pieces out of the way. The first thing we're going to do is to make the straps up. Very, very simple process. I want you to have a look. I've stabilised these with a medium weight iron-on stabiliser. You know I always use Veseline H250. You can use whatever you like. It just gives it a little bit of rigidity, because this little basket, or big basket, is going to really get some wear and tear. So you want it to be very, very strong and stable. So I've stabilised it, you can see, but also, can you see at the top and the bottom? Let me just open that up, there you go. I've actually folded over 1/4 inch, and I've used my quilter's tape to stick that down. Because they're handles, we want these edges to be super, super neat. So what you're doing is you're folding in half to get your center line, and then you're bringing your two sides in, so your two long sides are in, and then you're going to fold again, and you're going to get your regular 1 inch strap. That's my favourite, it's my go-to. Sometimes I'll do 1/2 inch, but generally I'll do 1 inch, and it gives it nice rigidity, a nice bit of strength. So we're going to top stitch both of these. I've prepared one, I'm going to prepare the other one. Run those under the machine, and then we're going to attach them to the bag. Bag, what do we call it? I suppose it is a bag, isn't it? Right, so there's my other piece. You can see it nicely there. I'm going to put my iron on, and I shall bring my wall mat in, just so we've got a little bit of protection from the mat. Now, so quilter's tape, you know I like to use it. It's so useful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop that on ready while my iron's heating up, and both ends. And then I will use the iron to fold in half to get that centre line. You can do it without doing that, but quite honestly, I know that it's absolutely perfect when I do that. So that tape is on. Give it a little squidge down. I'm not taking the backing off yet, because now I'm going to fold it in half. So I'm folding it half, wrong sides together, and just getting that centre line. There we go. And I'm just going to now peel that off, and I'm going to fold that over. I suppose I could have done it before. It's one of those things that if you've done it that way once, you tend to do it the same way again. There's no reason, no rhyme, no reason. So let's just fold that over. So I've taken the backing off the quilter's tape, and I'm just folding that over, and I'll give that a press. And I'll fold that again. Now, if you have got, and we've talked about this before, a clapper, do put it on there. It makes a huge difference. So I'm just going to move that around while it's cooling down. I'm going to take this end off. I've already done that. I'm going to fold it over. There we go. Lovely. See how that's amazing, isn't it? It's not stuck. That's just because I've put the wood on there, and that sucks all the heat out of it, but it presses it. I mean, just incredible. Now, if I was to show you this without putting the clapper on, I want you to have a look. So you can see, and I'll do it that way. Can you see? It's not lying flat. It doesn't matter. It's just we like a little bit of perfection sometimes. So if I was to do that and put that back on again, I'll need it in a second just to do that second fold. Look at that. It's absolutely beautiful. So just a little tip from me to you. If you don't have one of those, maybe it's something that you can put on your birthday list to somebody, or your Christmas list. They're not hugely expensive, but it's one of those things that maybe somebody else can gift it to you. I know some partners, husbands, have made them. I think they have to be a certain, I don't know if it has to be a certain sort of wood, but it has to be super smooth. So if I was to use it again now and put it on there, Just switch my iron off while we're waiting. Just take some of that heat away, and I'll need these, so I'll put those there. You can see, look, it keeps it lovely and flat. So what we're going to do now we've pressed those, so we've got our creases. There we go. I'm just going to fold it to the middle and top stitch. And if you find that your folded ends, that's my pokey tool. So if you find when you fold that over, let me show you here. If you find when you fold those ends over that these little raw edges stick out a little bit, can you see that? Use your pokey tool, or your stiletto, just to poke those little raw edges in, because you do, like I say, you want it to be really neat. Now that's just me being a perfectionist, but you may well be just the same. So use your pokey tool or your stiletto to help you with that. It really is a super tool. I've got a few of them actually, just to make sure I never lose one, which of course I always do. So let's have a look. Let's get my foot control ready. Check your stitch length. I want it to be about 2.5. This is a top stitch, but it's also a stitch that's got to hold the strap together. So we want it to be strong. So we'll keep that stitch length on to 2.4, 2.5. If it was decorative, we can whack it up to 3. That usually looks quite nice. So we're just top stitching across the bottoms and down both sides, so around all 4 sides. And when we attach it to the bag, we'll make a little box. And try if you can, and it's not always easy to do this, but try if you can to go over your original stitches. So all I'm doing here is I'm using my pokey tool, you can just see it there, and I'm pushing those raw ends in because I don't want them sticking out, even though we've glued them and sort of kept them as neat as we can possibly make them. I just want a half a stitch, it's always the way. Yeah, those ends still may well pop out. So we're doing about 1/8 of an inch, I'm sorry, 1/16 of an inch away from the folded edges of the fabric. And as you come back up, just go over those first 2 or 3 stitches. I wouldn't do a back stitch because it's a lot of threads and a lot of stitches. So look at that, it's beautiful. And you've got kind of 2 different sides to it, haven't you? Sort of a pastel side and a bright side. So remember that when you stitch them onto the bag, you want them both the same. I think I'll probably go for the bright side. So let's do the other one. And if you want to use clips or pins to hold all of these in place, please do that. Some of us aren't as confident, even with our straight stitching, and that's perfectly fine. We all had to start somewhere. And I bet anything you'll have improved hugely in your stitching, either by being part of the goal group and watching me, or watching other fellow sewists do their thing. It matters not. So when I put this onto the bag, I'm going to try and remember to get my stripes the same each side. Because it's got a definite, I want you to just have a look, it's got this definite orange, so maybe I want the orange to go into the middle of the bag, so when we loop it round they're like that. The other way would be like that. It doesn't matter, does it? But get them both the same. Normally when I use striped fabric I do it across. Because getting stripes to look neat is difficult, but these are kind of quirky stripes. There you go. So those are the two straps made. Now in the pattern it tells you exactly, let's get the lining out of the way, it tells you exactly where to place the straps on the main bag. Now all I'm going to say to you is this, let me do it so it's the right way for you. This is half, so you've got a double piece. Let me hold it. Whoops, there's your double piece there. So I want you to fold it in half so both short edges come together. Okay, so you've got your short edges here. Okay, and then you've got your folded edge here. There we go, and get them nice and straight. So it's half. And now because I've got directional fabric, you can see the little houses. I think they're so cute. This is obviously the top of the bag and where the handles are going to be placed. In the pattern it tells you exactly where to measure on your fabric. So you're going to measure in the middle, then you're going to measure out, and you're going to measure down. So it's all beautifully neat. So follow the pattern so you know exactly where they're going to, where the handles are going to sit. Now, do you remember we had that conversation just a moment ago about the stripes? So I'm going to put, it doesn't matter. I'm going to get a bit pedantic about it. I'm going to put the orange to the centre. Now, what I want you to do is where you've put the pin of that exact mark, that's going to be the corner of your strap. So you're not putting it in the centre, you're not putting it over it, you're not putting it to one side of it, you're putting it to the corner. And that corner is on the inner. So I'm going to try and, let me show you on the side camera what I'm talking about. So look, there's one of my pins there. I perhaps should have used white. There's one of my pins there, and there's my other pin there, and that's the placement of the straps, okay? And the centre of that pin, maybe we can zoom in on this because this is important, but where the centre of that pin is, or just there, just right in the centre, that's where the corner of the strap goes, all right? And so if I was to hold my strap up, I want you to do it like that. So the corner, so this is your middle of your pin, you can see it. And I'm just going to place that like that. So they come into the bag. So we're not placing, if I hold it, try and hold it nicely for you, we're not placing it that side of the centre of the pin. We're not placing it over the centre. You can if you want, but this is just how I'm following the pattern. We're placing it so the corner of the strap sits on the middle of the pin. And if we were to put, I haven't got a pin that's going to really show up. I'm just going to try and see if I can find one, but I haven't. If we were to do a crosshatch like that, see how those pins are lying? Not terribly straight, but it sits in there. Okay, so that corner sits right in there. It just means that your bag will be the same, both sides. Both will be exactly identical. You know, there's no sort of guess. So I've decided I'm going to put the orange to the middle, aren't I? Got to remember, I keep pulling it about and then I move it again. So I'm putting my strap there and I'm taking that pin out and I'm just going to pin my strap in place. And I'm actually pinning it, and you see where I'm pinning it, where the red pin is? I'm pinning it further up because I'm only going to do a 1/2 inch box. Then I'm going to bring that handle round and then it's going to sit there like that. And again, I shall pin that about 1 inch from the top there. It won't sit straight until I've stitched it. If I can hold it, it'll be better. But there we are. So now we're going to do the same the other side. So don't forget the orange, in my case, goes to the centre. So let's take the pin out and pin it about 1 inch from the top. Bring that strap round. Take the pin out. I can use another pin. And pop that pin in place. There we go. So the main thing to remember is to keep those straps straight. It'll be easy for them to twist. Okay, so now we're going to work down all 4 strap ends, and we're just going to do about a 1/2 inch box. So start a 1/2 inch up from the strap bottom, across, down, up and around. And like I say, keep those straps straight. 1 stitch just to secure that back stitch, and then across. If you can stitch on your original stitching, great. If you can't, don't worry about it. So we'll do all 4. And then when you come back to where you started, just go over those first few stitches, and that should be plenty strong enough. So there's 1. Let's do that again. So about a 1/2 inch from the bottom of the strap. And I've still got my stitch length on 2.5. Again, it has to be quite strong, so I've kept my stitch length small. It's going to get a lot of throwing about, I think, this bag. So trim the ends, take the pins out. So we've done 2. So you can see it's quite a big bag, really, but oh so useful. I know my grandson William has already asked for it for his dinosaurs. So I think that will be kept in his bedroom. I think maybe the other grandchildren will be asking for one. So a very, very useful make. Just overshot by a stitch. Okay, lovely. And then the last one. Straight across. I'm just trying to get onto those original stitching lines that I did. It's not too bad. If you use the same stitch length and you start off where a stitch ended, it would line up perfectly, but goodness me, I don't think we need to be that particular, do we? Let's just wriggle that around. And then there you go. Super. So there we are. So it's all 4 straps placed, and I've got my orange facing the centre as I wanted. Let me hold it like that, you can see. So all we've done is a little box at the bottom, and if I turn it to the wadding, the batting, you'll be able to see those little boxes there quite clearly. Good. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is to join the side seams 1/4 inch. So let's pop no, we don't have to bother with the straps at the moment. Now I want you to have a quick look also at my wadding, my batting. When I cut this out, I cut this piece first and realised it wasn't long enough. And rather than waste it, I actually used a piece of wadding tape to join 2 pieces together. So it's okay to do that. Some people would use their zigzags on their machine to join 2 pieces together. but I didn't want to do that. Firstly, this machine doesn't do a zigzag. Secondly, I do have the tape, so it would be foolish not to use it. But I thought, well, I'll show you, because that might well happen to you one day. I've got a big roll of wadding, and you'd think that I would... I'm going to just turn my stitch length up a little bit. Yes, so you think I'd have plenty. I do have plenty, but for whatever reason, I cut it short. Now, because we're going through multiple layers, you might want to use your walking foot if you want to. I'm using a regular 80-20 wadding, and this new roll I have, it seems thicker than the original that I had before, or the one I had before. There we are. So there's our tube. So we've made our tube, okay, and it's got the one seam. The one seam goes just to one side of the bag. So now we have to attach the base, and it's just this circle. Now this should fit perfectly, but what I do suggest you do is pin all the way around. So, and don't forget, I'm going to use the edge of my Decaville. So I'm just going to put a few pins in. And what you can do is you could find your half and quarter circle and make sure your bag fits in those places. So for instance, let me start again. Let me show you what I mean. So fold your circle into half and give it a crease. Okay. Fold it again, matching up those crease lines, and give it a squidge. Put your iron on it if you want to. So the first line here, the first crease, I will line up to the seam, and what I'll do is I'll put a pin there. You could cut a notch if you want to. I'll just pop a pin in there, and that's my kind of halfway line. And then bring your two sides out, so you're putting the pin and the seam together, and you could do a little crease or cut a little notch, or just pop a pin in. Give you that quarter mark. Let's do that again. Sometimes it's worth spending a bit of time on this. And also don't forget, I mean, if you want to use, I'm going to use 4 pins here, but use 8 pins, use 16 pins, make it easy. So now I'll line up my crease lines with those pins. And in the pattern it shows you, I can't remember how many pins I put in. There was lots. So I've sort of tied up that area there. So now I've got to my seam line on the other side. You can open up that seam if you want to. And I'm just matching up the seam with the little crease I did. And we're going to stitch, which just reminds I've done the wrong way around. We're going to stitch on the straight side, not on the circle. So I'll put my pin in there, turn it. So I'm lining up my pin and my crease line again. I will remember that I'm doing this on the straight in a minute. Again, same the other side. So the crease against the pin. I remembered that time. So we've got 4 places pinned. So you might want to do more in between, but if you can fit the bag part to the base in that quarter circle part, you can see it's going to fit, then you're good to go, aren't you? But if you want safetiness, if you like, do another pin in the eighths. Okay, so we'll start at the seam. You can start wherever you like. Pop it under the machine, and because this is a nice big bag, then if you want to use your free arm, I'm not sure how you would do it, but it's not going to be possible, but you don't need to fuss. That's what I'm trying to say. You don't need to fuss with this at all. So I'm just going to make sure my fabric, which is not brilliantly glued to my wadding, is a 1/4 inch. So make your way around. Do it in little bite-sized chunks. Keep adjusting. Make sure everything is lying flat. To be honest with this, because it's a really big base, a really big circle and a really big bag piece, you shouldn't have any problems with the curves. You shouldn't need to clip in or anything like that. The other thing to remember is because the circle is stabilised, there's no bias on this, so you can't sort of pull it about to make it fit. You just got to ease it in if necessary. Oh, hi there. Thank you for stopping by. I was going to talk to you about the Gold Club actually, and I'm preparing for our Facebook Live tonight, because every week on Facebook in the Gold Sewing group, we actually do other things like free motion embroidery tonight. So the Gold Online Sewing Group, what is all that about? Well, if you go to my website, lizzycurtis.com, you'll see the sign up tab. Click on that, you get a choice of membership, but what you do get every month is 2 different super patterns, especially for you. And do you know what? When they go in the shop the next month, they're $4.99 each. So this is an absolute bargain for £5, about $6.20, something like that. You're getting those 2 full patterns with video tutorials as well. So why don't you join up today and join the online sewing group, which is known as the Gold Sewing Group. I'll see you there. Bye. So 1/4 inch. Don't go any more than 1/4 inch because it will not fit. So little bite-sized chunks. We're working our way around. There we go. Just make sure that fabric is meeting up. And we'll work our way around. Like I say, you probably want to pin it a lot more than I've done. Okay. Concentration levels are obviously high because I'm not saying anything. It's just making sure the fabric, so the fabric of the circle and the fabric of the bag body are meeting up. Those raw edges are sitting on top of each other. And it's hard to do that when you've got wadding. So maybe cut the wadding back a little bit so it's a little bit shorter, if you like, than the actual the fabric, and then you'll be able to see the edge of the fabric more easily. So just make your way around. We're nearly there. So coming back to where we started. So just keep adjusting if you need to. Get those raw edges to sit nicely on top of each other. And we're there. Lovely. So that's now attached. Gives a nice firm bottom. Now if you wanted to, you could put some more wadding on top of this circle if you wanted to. Maybe I would do it before, I'm not sure, but this you could do it now, just if you're going to just adhere it for using a iron-on wadding batting, or maybe you just use your permanent spray to hold it in place, because obviously the seams hold the wadding on the big piece if it's just sprayed on with glue. So let's have a look, see what it looks like. Love this fabric. I've been waiting. I've had it a little while, and I've been waiting for the right project. I have clear visions on what things should be used for, and I'm sure you're the same. And this one really was perfect for Jazmin. So just pushing that out, you can see, can't you? She's got a little lumpy bit there, that's it. And we've got the makings of the bag. So you can see how easy this is to put together and how useful. Oh, that looks so nice, doesn't it? So now it's a case of just putting the lining together. Now don't forget to leave a turning gap. So when we stitch the two short sides together, like that, okay, leave a good 6 inches, because that base is quite strong, you know, it's quite a powerful, strong, solid base because of the Decaville light. So come down about 4 or 5 inches, break your threads, leave about 6 inches. Start again with a nice back stitch and then come down. Now the lining is not stabilised at all, but if you wanted to make this reversible, which of course it could easily be reversible, just put a layer of you know, lightweight interfacing on it, and then it will have a little bit of stability on the outside. So I'm not going to pin this time, I'm going to go rogue and just go straight for it. We'll see. We'll see what happens at the end. Will I live to regret it? Who knows? But this time it's a little bit quicker because there's no wadding, there's no stabiliser, there's nothing that's visually in my way. So these tend to come together a lot more easy, a lot quicker. Be careful that you don't stretch your circle, because obviously the whole thing is on a bias. It could work in your favour or it could work against you. So the difference between the two, isn't it? It's incredible. But because I've got visual, and of course this is what I said to you about cutting away the wadding 1/4 of an inch, because that would give you a better visual of the raw edges. Because that's all I'm doing. And because it's a large circle, it's just like almost stitching 2 straight bits together. I think you'll find this a real easy make. And although I've used quilting cotton, think about tweeds, think about curtain or upholstery fabric. As long as your machine can take it, use you know, like a PVC fabric, for instance. You can pick them up really cheap. They're really affordable. So we're just coming back to the beginning now. So just make sure your last little bit's going to fit okay in case you've stretched anything. And let's have a look. Let's get that straightened up. We still want those raw edges to meet. That's to keep their circle looking absolutely lovely. And there we are. So there is our bottom of our lining put together. Let's turn it through and see what it looks like. Don't forget we've got that turning gap. So look at that, isn't that beautiful? That lovely piece of fabric. And there's our base. If you want to give that an iron, by all means do so. So we're going to just put the two together, so it's a nice easy make. There we go. But incredibly useful, incredibly useful. I think you're going to love it. Right sides together, and all you're going to do is match your seams up. So as long as we've put it in there, there we go. As long as we've put it in there okay, match that seam up straight away. So there's the seam here of my lining, and there's the seam there of my outer fabric. And I'll pin it just to hold that in place. There we go. I was listening to somebody the other day, and it reminded me that pins can go blunt. And you think, well, yes, of course, but I don't think sometimes we remember that, because I've got a few pins in my stash now that I struggle with, and yet I keep them. It's like a lot of things, isn't it? We keep things just in case. So I've got my pin there. Let's just move it off the desk for a moment. Shake it in place. So we want to make sure that our handles obviously sit inside. So push them in. And you're going to perhaps find the halfway point again. Pull that out. I think I just machine it, but let's be good. So there's the halfway point thereabouts. And we're going to pin so the pin head sticks out of the edge, because as I stitch, that's what I'm going to pull out with my other hand. So you can pin all the way around, obviously. And again, if you want to use your free arm at this time, please do. But it's such a big piece, I don't think it'll be too much of a worry. Open up your seams if you want to. So you've got your outer seam, you've got your lining seam. So flatten those if you wish. 1/4 inch seam allowance. The only thing I'd say is at the end of all this we'll top stitch. So we'll just whiz around, and if you've cut them well, they should fit together perfectly. And a little tip, I've started right on the seam, but if you start about 2 or 3 inches away from the seam, and by the time you've machined all the way around, you're getting close to that seam, you can see that there's going to be a difference of 1/2 inch or something. You don't want to pleat or a tuck. So you could adjust your seam, whichever seam it is that needs adjusting, taking in a little bit. You can adjust it there. We'll see how we get on. And of course, if you're pinning or using your quilting clips on this, like you should really, then you'll know before you start stitching if you need to make an adjustment. And of course a lot of this is down to the fact that we're hand cutting everything, and there's always room for that little bit of error, and that's fine. We can forgive ourselves that, surely. So just make sure those raw edges stick together. Now I'm coming back to where I started. So I've got my finger and thumb on the place where I started, and I'm just making sure that everything is laying flat and making sure that my 2 layers are now neatly lined up together. Just whiz that last bit through and we're done. And I've gone over about the first 5 or 6 stitches, and I haven't done a back stitch. So there we are. So now it just needs turning through. So I'm grabbing hold of the Deckerville to bring that through first. Because once we get that through, everything else will come through fine. Now it will need a little bit of a press, just so the bottom edge is nice and neat. Okay, so we've got the Deckerville through, so now all the rest can just be pulled through. And I'm going to be really good and stitch my turning gap. A lot of fabric, beautiful. Oh I love it so much. So I'm just getting hold of where I stopped stitching, or where I started stitching, excuse me. Just pull it, give it a tug, and those seams will sit neatly inside. You can give that a bit of a finger press to hold it, and then we'll just do a neat top stitch. Now obviously if you're going to want this to be reversible, you might want to hand stitch this part. There we are. So it's just a case of stitching from there to there with a little top stitch, and that's closed the turning gap. I'm fairly confident I don't need to undo it. So push your lining in. Like I say, it needs a good press. Never judge it until you've given it a press. And what we want to do also is to do a top stitch along there. Start at the seam and just roll those seams out. If you get your fingers just below that 1/4 inch and roll it, that'll push your seam out. And again, between a 1/16 and an 1/18 of an inch. Don't do it too chunky. It looks clumsy if you do that. And again, we could have given this a press or an iron, nice hot dry iron, just to make sure that the seams were out and it's super duper neat. But for speed, I'll just top stitch it as is. I think you'll really like making Jazmin. I've got a sort of an idea in my head that I will see lots of these in the Gold Group page. And when you come to look at this, when it's on in my shop, then obviously I know you can't post in the Gold Group, but certainly you can send me a message with your pictures. That would be amazing. And what fabric? What fabric? See, now if I realised that William wanted this for his dinosaurs, I'd have got some dinosaur fabric. It was me thinking it was for me. That's a silly thing to think. Oh. So I've got some threads coming through. I'll trim those off in a minute. It's just the frayed fabric coming through. Try and, excuse me with my licking of my fingers, try and not have the lining show, unless that's something you want to make a feature. But just roll the fabric between your fingers. A damp sponge to dip your fingers in will always help. It's just grabbing the fabric so it doesn't slip. And then we're coming back to where we started. Just got some frayed fabric here. Okay, excuse me again. So you can tell that it's not a complicated make, but incredibly useful. We're back to where we started. And there we are. And that's our Jazmin made. She's big, isn't she? Lovely. Let's just make sure she's lined up properly. Yeah. There we go. That's better. Gorgeous fabric. And there's you can see the bottom. Now I would take this to the iron and I would go around the edge of this and iron that so it was really lovely and crispy. I'd pull the lining out, to be honest, and just do the outer just to make sure that it was lovely and, like I say, crispy. So there we are. So that is one Jazmin. I don't think she's going to sit up until I've pressed her well. I always like to put a little bit of starch on them. And of course, if you wanted to, like I said before, you could put Decaville all the way around, but that would be quite costly. And I don't think it's that necessary. By the time you get clothes or toys in there, it'll be fine. And there's the original one there. You can see. Woo! See if I can stand it up. There we are. So I think they're a great make, aren't they? So that is Jazmin. And I hope you make loads.